A word of warning, this podcast explores graphic and disturbing stories and includes some strong language. It therefore may not be suitable for our young listeners or other folks who may find it disturbing. Hello and welcome to True Crime Daily, the podcast covering high-profile and under-the-radar cases from across the country every week. I'm your host, Ana Garcia. We are recording this on April 21st of 2021. I like those numbers. There's a lot of good numbers in there. Today, we are being joined by criminal defense attorney Robert K. Corbett III, who is based in Charlotte, North Carolina, which, by the way, we're going to have a huge case out of there today. Robert was a prosecutor for approximately 10 years, ultimately specializing in homicide prosecutions. And then in 2012, Robert moved into private practice. You are a trial attorney. You handle some really tough cases. Robert, welcome to the program.
Hey, well, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to being here.
Oh, we're so excited about it. We're fascinated by your background. I love your bow ties. I wore a bow tie today in your honor.
Yes, yeah, I take it as it's part of the uniform. You need something to allow you to stand out and people can recognize you easily.
I love it. And your partner wears bow ties too, right?
Well, no, he's more into the traditional look, but he does more fitness, bodybuilding. So we kind of call ourselves the beard and the bow tie because he has the big mountain man beard, and then you can always identify him, and then you can always pick me out by the bow tie.
Ah, fabulous. We're going to talk more about your practice, your fabulous Instagram account that I follow. That's where I first found you. We'll talk about that later in the program. We're thrilled to have you. We really want to hear your insight. We have what I would say two really bizarre cases, the kind of cases that could both be made into movies. I don't often say that, but I think these two really fit that. So our first case, or at least one of the cases we're going to look at, is a North Carolina teacher who is leading a double life, but not just any double life here. It's not like he was having an affair or something else. He was killed in a shootout while trying to rob a Mexican drug cartel member. Who does that?
Yeah, seemed like something like out of an episode of Breaking Bad on, what's that, A&E or one of those cable stations. But it is like a bizarre case that you think is like made right for either television, some streaming service, or straight to the movies.
Yeah, it's really something that we're going to talk about that. But first, here is yet another strange case. A former NYPD officer has just pleaded guilty to an obstruction charge stemming from a murder for hire plot to kill her estranged husband and her boyfriend's 14-year-old teenage daughter who was annoying her. Okay. So obviously, if you cross this woman, she gets very mad and she starts allegedly hiring people. That was made for, I think I saw that plot on Lifetime probably not too long ago. Maybe that's where she got the idea.
Yeah, got the inspiration.
Okay, so let's talk about the details of this case. 36-year-old Valerie Cincinnati, who is a mother of two, was originally charged with murder for hire and obstruction of justice for allegedly trying to hire her then boyfriend to kill her estranged husband, Isaiah Carvalho Jr. So Valerie and Isaiah were going through a very bitter divorce. You always know this is going to be part of the plot. It seems like it always is. Very bitter divorce, a custody battle. And here's the other thing. Robert, she didn't want him to get a cut of her police pension. Okay.
So that's like, there's your motive right there, or the old song in terms of cheaper to keep her, just change the genders, I guess, a little bit on this one. But there are multiple ways that she probably could have done this, without resulting to try to hire someone to have them killed.
I find that all the time. So many of our cases have this same theme that you don't want to divorce them because you're afraid they're either going to get too much money or they're going to get the house or they're going to get the kids or you're just mad at them. And somehow the idea of killing them makes more sense. But then you end up spending the rest of your life in prison. How does that make more sense than a divorce that's uncomfortable?
Yeah. So when she went through that cost benefit analysis, obviously she chose poorly in terms of thinking that would be the easiest or least expensive way out.
Yeah. So Valerie asked her boyfriend, John DeRuba, who she referred to as Sugar Daddy. That's his nickname. And that is the nickname that is in the court documents. And she asked him, please hire me a hitman because I want to kill Isaiah. Valerie said that she'd pay $7,000. Now, here's the other thing. She wanted John. This is John, the current boyfriend. She wanted his teenage daughter dead because, according to prosecutors in court records, the teenager complained that Valerie, the girlfriend, cop, was spending too much of her father's money. I just don't understand how he went along with that part of the plan.
Yeah, and when I hear that, though, it sort of makes me think the problem with whenever you have a conspiracy, in that for prosecutors to have this information or to have details of the conversation, whenever you have more than one person involved, odds are, or statistically speaking, at least from my experience, there's always going to be someone that's going to end up, spilling the beans, telling the story to the police. And too many people have it in their mindset that once I tell it to this person, it's in the vault, it's never going to come out, and it always does. And just like, if I tell clients of where they'll say that, hey, I may have told A, B, and C, but A, B, and C will never talk to the police. And I always say, just wait. Because whenever there's more than one person, somebody always goes to the police and ends up telling them what happened.
Yeah, incredibly so. And that's what happened here. John, aka Sugar Daddy, decided that he was going to rat out his honey, the cop. According to court records, that decision of his was made while he was in custody on an unrelated charge. Right. Sugar Daddy's reading the room and is like, my only way out of here is to rat out my girl.
Yeah. Give them a bigger fish.
Exactly. And they bit. Because you can imagine, here you are, you're in a police department, and you're now telling them that your girlfriend wants to kill her ex-husband. And you're like, no, it can't be true, right? Because you'd say, this guy's just making this crap up. So as it turns out, he had text messages that he showed the authorities in real time to back up his allegations, which they then took seriously. And what ends up happening, according to court records and the prosecutor in this case, because she's now entered a plea, is that he agreed to cooperate. And then the authorities brought in the FBI and they set up a plot themselves. So you had like these, what I call two concurrent schemes going on at the same time. You have Valerie, the cop, who's planning eventually to try and get two people killed by hiring someone. And on this side, you have the police and the FBI who are making her believe that she's going to end up getting this, except they are playing the parts of the hitman, and they are video and audio recording all of her conversations.
Yeah. And then the thing that strikes me is for her to be a law enforcement officer, or just not even a law enforcement officer, but any layperson, but definitely for a law enforcement officer, you would think she would know not to put something in writing. How often do you see things pop up in terms of on text messages, emails, what have you? And that is the crucial piece of evidence that the prosecution uses in order to try to convict. And also, how many times have we seen in the news of these murder for hire and they never find a true hitman? It's always they're talking to the FBI or talking to someone in law enforcement. And person on the street would know not to do that. But for her to be involved in law enforcement, how does she still fall under this, ruse or what have you, and not think that she couldn't get caught up in this?
Well, don't you find most of the time with the people who try to pull these things off, there's an unbelievable amount of arrogance. They are so completely convinced that they know better than everyone, that they can con anyone, that they can control the situation. It always surprises me. Like, where would I come up with the confidence or really the insanity to say, yeah, this is a good idea?
Yeah, and that's probably a good point in terms of, probably most criminals think they're smarter than everyone else in the room if they're a confidence person or a flim-flam or what have you. And maybe her being involved in law enforcement led her to believe that she could avoid these pitfalls. But as we see, she couldn't.
No, absolutely not. So these conversations began to be recorded in May of 2019 between John, Sugar Daddy, and Valerie, the cop. And John then is telling her, look, I think I'll take care of these murders and the hitman will take care of these murders over a weekend. And apparently in these recordings, Valerie said, well, that's really stupid to try and kill 2 people over one weekend. That's going to look suspicious. Like, that's what's going to look suspicious. Like, that's the problem.
Yeah, not that people who are some connection to her are both ending up dead in a short period of time. But then, but what you said, it brings me back to my point of why these conversations were even getting recorded. That if you think you're smarter than everybody else, you should know that nothing needs to be in writing, done over the phone. It should be face to face. And even then, you should be super paranoid. Absolutely.
Write little notes, right?
Sure, yeah.
Do something. Be very, it's just kind of like with organized crime, traditional organized crime. The members are very, very smart, and they know to always use code for everything because they know the authorities are in the van across the street listening.
Right. Yeah. So I've never dealt with a mafioso case, but I've seen enough movies to know that, hey, that's probably how you need to operate and not do anything that's going to lead you to get caught.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to minimize getting caught.
Actually, organized crime is one of my favorite things. I'm not going to take a big detour here, but part of my career, I spent quite a few years in Atlantic City. You want to talk about the mob? Oh my God, the cases I covered between Atlantic City and South Philly were incredible. Just like the craziest things. And then as a reporter, they would leave notes in the windshield of the news van. I'm like, okay, all right. Not threatening notes, but like notes to get a message about a particular case or something.
Right.
Yeah.
But still, they weren't going out in terms of having conversations with a co-conspirator recorded or, memorialized via text or notes or email.
No, absolutely not. Well, back to this weekend of murder as Sugar Daddy was planning. So Valerie suggests to him, hey, why don't you kill your daughter first? And then maybe, get my husband killed a month or 2 later. Again, this is all documented. And then she says, why don't you try different locations? Was like, well, of course, I don't think you want them killed at the same time together. That'd be really bizarre. Isaiah, the estranged husband, Valerie was concerned that his murder in particular not look too suspicious. So she wanted it to happen in a neighborhood that maybe had more crime. She called it in these recordings, this has to take place in the hood. So it would be obvious that he was most likely to be killed there. I'm just thinking to myself, oh, lady, your idea of trying to make things look, not as they seem, it's just not so clever. So then she starts getting agitated. This to me is unbelievable. She gets agitated with her boyfriend, Sugar Daddy, about how he's going to kill his daughter. And she actually said to him, why don't you just run her the F over? It's like a bad movie. It's really.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And the thing that it kind of like jumped out at me is her describing certain neighborhoods as being the hood, and those neighborhoods, I guess, based on crime statistics, that's where the murder should take place. And when I hear that would cause me to have some concerns in terms of how she is viewing certain areas. Did she investigate or have any dealings with these neighborhoods? If she named them specifically, just in terms of is she more reserved in terms of not responding to calls for services to certain areas? Just for her to put that out there. I mean, obviously she's thinking it's, with the confidant or what have you, but showing her true colors, how she thinks about certain neighborhoods or communities, that if I was a part of that community, that would cause me to concern and, question in terms of what, if any, arrests she may have made, not even having to do with this case, but what was her involvement with those areas.
Well, clearly, based on these allegations against her, this is not a woman who has any respect for human life or the dignity of people and treating people fairly. You're trying to kill your ex-husband. You're trying to kill a 14-year-old girl because she annoys you. I mean, this is a person who has no regard for anyone. But I do agree with you. It is very telling about how she viewed neighborhoods and policing. And it is... It's like pulling back a curtain that is very scary, especially right now, and very revealing and telling. I think
Right.
so.
Like I said, it may not necessarily like go anywhere, but I know there has to be, in terms of either advocates or defense attorneys who are looking at what cases have I had with her. If you have an officer who's willing to go out and do this, then I think it's a viable argument to say, well, what wouldn't they have done? And, those cases are kind of hard to kind of like maybe dig up and make an argument you can get back in court. But I'd certainly be trying to look, if I had a case with her, to say, hey, if she's willing to go out and try to have 2 people killed and, and pay somebody to do it, then I'm questioning the veracity of any statement she may have given in a case that I had with her.
Right. Is it possible that she framed any of the suspects that she arrested? I think it's a really reasonable question, which you're right. That's an avenue that many defense attorneys and people who've been convicted who take up and say, hey, wait a minute. This person is not above the law. This person's a criminal.
Right. And so I think those would be probably, if they haven't already, they're probably maybe in the works of people trying to get cases back in. Like, here we refer to them as motions for appropriate relief, to say, hey, this was something wrong done in this case. We have new evidence that was not known or discovered at the time. So, Judge, you need to reopen this and let's take another look at it.
Do judges generally do that? Will they reopen cases when they have, when that you have a criminal cop on the case?
It depends on, I would say, like what that officer is being charged with. For instance, if like here where we're dealing in terms of, some violent crime, and if she made any, false statements to law enforcement during the investigation and that comes out, I think that's certainly an avenue to pursue. Now, whether how successful you are, that can just kind of depend on what jurisdiction and what judge you get on a particular day. But it kind of depends, I think, on the crime of that officer is accused of committing.
Yeah. We've had a lot of cases here in Los Angeles overturned when we had a very big corruption case where you had a lot of dirty cops planting things and evidence, mostly with gang members. So ultimately what ended up happening is that the gang members ended up getting their cases overturned and they walked because of what was going on. But that ultimately helped clean things up a little bit more here in LA. Well, let's get back to this case, because here comes the moment of truth. So a lot of this is taking place on Long Island. And so the feds arrange for officers at the Nassau County Police Department to go to the next level in the setup, if you will, of Valerie the Cop. They have now set up these fake photos, and they are the police are now pretending that Isaiah, her ex-husband, has actually been killed as planned. So the setup is made to look very real, where the cops come knocking on Valerie's door. They show her photos of the crime scene that he has been killed as evidence to break the news to her, because after all, this is her ex-husband. And this is all being recorded. Being video recorded, and she apparently starts crying the crocodile tears about how upset she is. Oh, my poor ex-husband, blah, blah, blah. And so much drama. Because she's taken the plea deal, though, Robert, we're never going to get to see or hear these videos. They would have been played in court, but she decided to plea and avoid trial. So we'll never get to see this drama played out.
Yeah, well, it won't be played out in front of a jury, but it could certainly be referred to at sentencing by the prosecutor, and even prosecutor could even like play it, or just say in terms of, to give the judge full synopsis of what occurred, maybe even play just briefly to say, Judge, this is what we're dealing with. In terms of, say, this is how she reacted at that moment. Everyone knew it was fake, especially the defendant, but this is how she did in a further attempt to try to cover her tracks. So you're right. It wouldn't be played for a jury, which I was thinking that would be prime, probably exhibit, number 1 to play for the jury right off the bat. But the information would still be able to come out in court.
Yes, exactly, because it's been in all of the court records. So what's also interesting is that prosecutors say they have additional recordings where she allegedly said that she wasn't worried about the murder because she would always have an alibi and she'd be sure that that alibi would cover her so she couldn't possibly be associated with it. So she seemed to think that she had it all figured out. Well, the obstruction charge is what she has pleaded to, and that is specifically for deleting phone messages and for destroying 2 cell phones that were used with her boyfriend as part of this scheme. So Valerie began serving as a New York City Police Department officer around 2007. Her attorney confirmed that she resigned in March in anticipation of this plea. Now, as part of this deal, she faces up to and no more than 5 years in prison as part of the deal. And this sentencing is going to happen on October 29th. And here's what's interesting is she's already been in jail for about a year and a half. She's been held at, there was no bond for her. So that will probably be considered as time served. So it's possible, depending on what the sentence is, up to a maximum of 5 years, she may not spend more than another 3 in prison for all of this.
Yeah. Now, like I said, it's certainly possible that she could get credit for time served because you said it's a fairly low-level felony charge. But I wouldn't be surprised if she doesn't serve more or even serve the max, because what you're dealing with is not just, Jane, John Doe, everyday citizen. It's a police officer violating public trust and a police officer knowing how the system worked and trying to subvert that in order to get away with the crime. But for the FBI, I guess, getting involved, it may or could have actually turned into an actual, murder or attempted murder. And I would think that would probably be the angle that the prosecutor would go with in terms of asking why she should receive more than just credit for time served.
That sounds reasonable. It really does. And I think the fact that she was a police officer, yeah, she knew much better than anybody else. She's held to a different standard on this one. So one of the things the judge is considering, because she's entered a plea and there will be sentencing, and I guess she's, we're not sure. We don't think she'll be a flight risk. They're thinking of considering bail until sentencing and then have her maybe go home with an ankle monitor. It's something being considered. Now, this to me, out of everything we've heard, is just the one nugget that just is like, ooh, this is very suspicious. The judge who was hearing the plea deal and everything in court recently is not the original judge in this case, because the original judge on this case was killed by a car last week in Boca Raton, Florida.
Well, that does make as a unique wrinkle in this, in that I haven't seen that. It is probably unusual for judge who takes the plea not be the judge who does the sentencing, because the judge who takes the plea, whether the person's found guilty at trial or pleads guilty, that is the judge that knows more about the case. But for that unfortunate incident happening, then that would be the same judge as sentencing. But then with this occurring, although it does, in light of everything else that occurred earlier, it does probably make one, scratch their head and say, wow, could she have possibly been, involved in that? But, absence of anything, pointing to her, any credible evidence, any statements, it's just probably just mere conjecture. And it's something that would not factor into her sentencing in October or any bond hearing that may be coming up before that date.
It is possible that it's just a regular car accident and the poor judge was killed in all of this. But I am one who rarely believes in coincidence when it comes to crime cases.
Right? I tend to always say, like, there's no such thing as a coincidence. But then, like, you look in terms of what value would she possibly gain by being even remotely associated with it? Excuse me. Since she's already entered the guilty plea and it's only waiting on sentencing, unless, you say, hey, that judge has made such adverse statements to her or about her case publicly. But that would be one of the things in terms of when, not if, but when it becomes a movie, then that twist will be added in, and then they would add more in terms of, she must have done something, at a far reach to Florida.
I know. It's just even the location, Boca Raton, Florida. I'm just like, ooh, this is just too much. I can't believe this. So when I read that, I was like, this is just for me, it's my little suspicious nugget here. But we're that's it. We're just like examining. We're not saying, we're not accusing, nothing. Nothing.
Yeah, certainly not.
Just suspicious. Now, back to the boyfriend, John Sugar Daddy. He, the informant now, did tell the New York Daily News, quote, and I always love these quotes. These are always very telling. He says, quote, after all she has done, talking about Valerie, and all the damage, I still love her and always will. And John also told the newspaper that they have matching till death tattoos.
Well, I guess a nice, sweet little ending. I mean, hopefully that gives her some, solace, but she still has the felony conviction, still may serve additional time in jail, but it is probably like an odd statement, to be made after what, all occurred. Nobody would fault him to say the complete opposite.
Right.
So, not wanting to have anything to do with her because of what she was trying to do.
Yeah. The whole thing is a very bizarre case. Very bizarre.
Least, yeah.
Before we move on to our next case, here is a quick word from our sponsor. Finding a new home that fits your family's needs can be tricky. You want room to spread out, space to gather, and a place to get away from it all. Luckily, when you need a mortgage that fits your family's needs, you go to Rocket Mortgage. With Rocket Mortgage, you can see your loan options, closing costs, tax estimates, and more all online in real time to get the full picture before anything is finalized. You can plan with certainty knowing you have a mortgage solution that works for your family. Visit rocketmortgage.com/truecrimedaily because when you need a mortgage that fits your life, Rocket can. Call for cost information and conditions. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states. NMLSconsumeraccess.org, number 3030. Well, Robert, we are now moving into your neck of the woods here. We're going to North Carolina, where a popular high school teacher and coach was living a double life. Not just any double life, though. 40-year-old Barney Harris was killed in a gun battle while trying to steal money and maybe drugs from a member of a Mexican drug cartel. Like a school teacher involved.
The most bizarre thing I think I've heard in a long time. Robbing a drug dealer probably, you say, isn't the best of life choices. Choosing to rob a member of the cartel, which you don't even think, like I said, like you mentioned, I'm in North Carolina. This occurred probably 30 miles up the road. We don't even think of the cartel being around, these parts. We're not like sleepy little town. We're not Mayberry, North Carolina, but still, you don't think of the cartel having a reach this far east. So maybe that's an eye-awakening for a lot of people. But just the idea of thinking that not only am I going to deal with the cartel, but I am going to track and follow this person and come prepared with a bulletproof vest with the plan of, if this goes down, then we're going to get into a shootout with this person, and then steal the drugs and then be ready to teach class on Monday morning. Yeah,
it's incredible. It's you wouldn't believe it unless it were true, because it really is bizarre. I feel like this is like the middle America, the middle class version of the movie Scarface with Al Pacino, right? Because here it's all about the drug wars and the shootouts, and here you have the high school coach, who everybody loves, and somehow is involved with this and hatches this insane plot that he's, of all the people in the world that you're going to try and steal money from, this,
He's a cartel member. And he had to have woken up that day and, and had in his mind that, hey, this is a good idea. This has a high probability of success, that even once we get away and they come looking for us, they're not going to go to the local high school. My secret identity is intact.
It is unbelievable that he thought this was a good idea. So Barney taught Spanish, perhaps a skill that he picked up in his other life of his.
With the cartel.
Yes, that's right. It's important to be able to communicate. So he taught Spanish, and then he coached varsity basketball and track at Union Academy Charter School in Monroe. His body was found in a mobile home on April 8th, about 2 hours from Charlotte. He had a bulletproof vest on, as you said, which apparently did little to save his life. And the sheriff has quoted what occurred there right before he died as an old-style Western shootout. No other way to explain what happened. I mean, we're talking about not just shooting back and forth inside the mobile home where he was, but bullets also were found in 3 other neighboring homes. So this is like Scarface, right? So someone else was killed in this shootout, 18-year-old Alonso Lara. Now, he's believed to be the drug runner. Authorities say that he was shot execution style. His hands and feet were tied, and he was shot in the back of the head. Again, it's almost as if like all the cues are coming from a movie on how to do this. I mean, the man is the coach, right? He is a Spanish teacher at a high school.
Yeah, it's hard to believe in terms of being involved. And probably you can say that for anyone, but in terms of someone that has that type of position, someone that has that influence, that, you would, expect, your kids to look up to, at least in some way, in terms of how we generally view that profession or generally view teachers, and to realize or discover that this is an entirely different side that, that community was not aware of, or at least like you hope or think that the kids at that school aren't aware of it and weren't exposed to it in any way. But that would be like a question I'd have in terms of, would say at least someone has to know or suspect, or rumors going around say, hey, you know what, teacher down the hall is up to, or whatnot.
And this is someone who, again, is in a position kind of like the cop in the previous case. He's in a position to protect our children. That's part of the role of being a teacher, besides education and mentoring, but to also keep the kids safe. So I mean, it is hard to believe that he could carry out these 2 very different lives and people not notice. This we don't know. Right. We don't know all the details, and things are emerging. What's also interesting to me, Robert, is that when he was first found dead, the immediate reaction was like, oh my God, the coach has been killed. This is horrible. And the whole community goes into mourning and statements are made. And then after the sheriff then reveals publicly the circumstances under which he was killed, everyone's like, oh, and they're taking everything back.
So we take back, everything, every good thing we said,
exactly,
like hours ago. But the other thing with it is, and that's just, skeptic by nature, not disputing or minimizing the tragedy of the situation, or disputing that he may have been involved in illegal drug sales, controlled substances, but just the assertion that it is a Mexican cartel that was involved in this. Because that just, like we said earlier, that just comes out of nowhere. What intelligence does that agency have to let them believe, hey, this was the cartel and this is what was involved? Or are there some assumptions that have been made that we know this person, based on records we may have gotten from the federal government, this person had ties to a cartel. Therefore, there's making some intuitive leap that it had to have been cartel related. But that doesn't change the fact that you still have a teacher leading a double life, and those circumstances called up to him.
Well, apparently, after the police arrived at the shootout scene, which we will describe, the authorities, the sheriff's department, again, there must have been something that someone knew because the FBI is part of the current investigation, along with some of the authorities from Mexico are involved. So either this is a place that was under surveillance, or there were known conspirators to U.S. officials. It's something, you're right. There's something triggered oh boy, this isn't just a regular old, stash house in a mobile home park. No. This is the Sinaloa drug cartel, originally run by El Chapo. Okay, it's just not.
Right. Yeah, and the federal government, doesn't, comment on ongoing investigations. So is it just a statement that was made, and now the local sheriff comes out and says, hey, this is the cartel? Because the FBI wouldn't come out and confirm that. So it could be, so what I just said, that could be completely off base, that they have 100% assurance that who he was involved with, or is it just some, guessing and kind of filling in the gaps, based on, what he heard, what the sheriff heard, or what he's able to glean. But, still, odd, suspicious, or whatever adjective you can come up, to describe it. And maybe our victim didn't know who he was dealing with. But, I know they were saying that I think the statement was that he had been tracking them, or, following their movements. So maybe he knew that they were involved in drugs, but maybe didn't know that they were part of the cartel. So that goes back to, why would you choose to do a hit or a robbery on a known cartel member? That's
probably more likely. I agree with you there, Robert. That seems to make more sense. It would be almost insane for the coach to say, I'm taking on the cartel myself, as opposed to, I'm taking, there's this guy and I'm going to hold him up, and he's a local whatever, drug dealer, and he's no big threat. I can take him. That's probably more likely the conversation he had in his head than, I'm taking El Chapo's people down with me. Unless
he goes like, this plan is so crazy, so insane, that's why it has to work. Because no one would ever suspect that I would go after the cartel.
Yes, I so agree with you there. According to the Alamance County Sheriff, Terry Johnson, the shootout took place at a trailer that was used as a stash house, and the gunfight spilled over into 3 of the neighboring homes. Okay, can you imagine the shootout? It is not just a shootout. What ends up happening is that during the shootout, one of the electrical boxes gets shot and destroyed. So then the electricity goes down in the mobile home park. So here, if you are just a regular person, doing your thing, and all of a sudden you hear gunfire, then all the lights go out. You're like, oh my God. What is happening?
Like I said, when we take it to the, back to the movie analogy of how this plot or storyline seems perfect for it, in the movie, that would have been done on purpose, in terms of, hey, in the middle of the gunfight, you got to have everything go dark, shoot the electrical box that takes out the electricity, maybe give you some type of tactical advantage. But, probably here, just dumb luck and just shooting blindly. And that's how they hit it.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, so Alamance is a smaller county than like where I am. So Charlotte is Mecklenburg County. That's the largest county in North Carolina. Alamance is up the road on the highway, but that's not even where this occurred. So Union County is on point line to my right. That's towards more east, going up one highway. So now, which is where the teacher's from. So he travels or ends up in Alamance, which is going the opposite direction past Charlotte, and going up, a different highway where this is occurring.
It appears that Barry, the coach, hatched this plot with his brother-in-law, his wife's brother, 32-year-old Stephen Stewart. He convinced him, apparently, to help him rob the drug runner. Risky plan, clearly not too smart. So here's the coach's playbook. To steal the money, to steal the money from the stash house. According to the Washington Post, the coach showed up at the stash house when the runner was out, the man who was killed execution style, and the coach was wearing his bulletproof vest. He had a mask, gloves, and the plan was that the coach was going to wait inside the trailer for the guy to come back and I guess say to him, "Where's the money? Give me the money." This is the playbook, according to authorities. Well, it was not a very solid plan because at 1 a.m., it was a full-on gunfight with the residents. They started calling 911 because of the bullets, and then the electricity went out. When deputies arrived, they found the coach dead in the bedroom, and they found Lara, the gun runner, was tied up but still alive. Got him to the hospital, but he ultimately died from the gunshot wounds to his head. The place had been ransacked. There was a kilo of cocaine, according to authorities, and $7,000 in cash, which makes me think all of this, over $7,000?
Well, you say all of it over $7,000 or all that was left was $7,000. For him to drive, Barry, our coach, to drive from Union County to Alamance County to do a robbery, I'm thinking, well, one, is this something he has done before prior to his teaching career, during his teaching career, to hatch the plan with his brother-in-law? Is it that we're going to get $7,000, so it has to be that they're thinking it's going to be more in order to make that trip in terms of, doing something that's more, involves more, closer proximity, and information that if this is a stash house, so there's going to be a lot there. So yeah, so they realize that this is all that there is to $7,000, or whoever is involved in the shootout, are they able to clear out what was there before law enforcement arrived, and that's like what's left behind? Because you said like the place looked like it had been ransacked. So I'm thinking if you've gone through it, if it's been ransacked, then you see what's there. And if you ransack the place, you'd have seen the $7,000, but you leave it. So so I think it'll be in terms of that's all that was there or that's all that was left.
Yeah. And I wonder if there were any other people in the trailer, because here's what doesn't make sense, Robert, and maybe you can help me, right? So we know that the drug runner, according to authorities, is tied up. Hands are tied, feet. He's shot in the back of the head. So it's unlikely that there was a massive shootout, coach dies, and then this guy gets tied up. No, that means there had to have been, there's the alleged accomplice, the brother-in-law, right, but he wouldn't have been shooting the coach. So that means, to me in my head, that there had to have been at least one other person in that trailer. There had to have been, because how else could the gunfight have taken off if you had one person already tied up? This person, you can't have a shootout with the person who's tied up.
Yeah, so I'd agree. There has to be at least one other person or multiple people. A possible scenario is that you have Barney and or his brother-in-law, that they are the ones who have contact with the drug runner. Are they the ones who, when they are unable to find what they're looking for, or they realize that, hey, there's supposed to be more here, we wouldn't have made this trip if that's all there was going to be here? Are they the ones who tie him up and, unfortunately, resulted in or responsible for killing him? And in the midst of this, that's when another person or other people show up, find out what's going on, that their stash house is being hit, is being robbed, and then the gunfight ensues. But yeah, so a lot of unanswered questions, which is why you probably have these different agencies all trying or coming to this one location in small county, North Carolina, trying to figure out what's going on.
There is an additional warrant for the roommate of the man who was killed, but it's not clear whether he was there during this gun battle or he and others were there. So definitely police are looking for more people, but they haven't told us how many more people they think were involved. Now, some of this was captured on surveillance cameras, at least the cars going in and out. That's what led police to say, well, hold on a second. We got a dead coach. We've got a drug runner who's been killed execution style. Was the coach working alone? And when they looked at the surveillance cameras and the cars, that led them to the coach's brother-in-law.
Hmm.
Now, according to the sheriff, who's very colorful in how he says things,
Right.
he says that when the police knocked on the brother-in-law's door, that he said he was actually relieved that it was the police and not the Mexican cartel coming to get him.
Yeah, probably one of the few times before you're glad that the police are showing up.
Right.
If you had to choose between those two alternatives, I think 9 times out of 10 or twice on Sunday, people will pick the police option.
Oh, it's just that to me is incredible. So Stephen Stewart, the brother-in-law, has been arrested and charged with first-degree murder and possession of a firearm by a felon. He is being held without bond. So the sheriff told ABC 11 again how relieved that he was to see the police, but I have to wonder now what kind of danger he's in, because he's probably sitting in a little country jailhouse thinking, oh boy, they're looking for me, if this is true.
Yeah, now that does make an interesting point. So he would be in the local jail, wouldn't be sent to prison, depending on if there were concerns about safety. So the way we tend to do it is that you would stay in your local jail unless the sheriff deems that they are unable to keep you safe locally, and then you're sent to a prison in North Carolina, or unless there is a capacity issue, or if you're being housed with co-defendants and it's a smaller county, smaller jail, and they have to keep people separate. Now, how large of a presence is a cartel in our local jails? I wouldn't be able to say that, because like I said, I'm surprised, because in our everyday dealings, the cases that we handle, that doesn't come up too often, cartel relationship in our local cases. Mm-hmm. When we're dealing with federal cases, I tend to hear that a little bit more. But for our local state cases, it's very little. We don't have those type of connections. So being in custody, I think in general, and knowing who may be after him, I think that definitely has to cause him some concern. And then you're thinking of, am I safer inside versus outside? If I'm inside, then they're keeping me in a segregated area, presumably, so that I have limited interaction. So maybe you may say that he's fine where he is. And here, and like most places, that you are not given a bond for first-degree murder upon arrest anyway. And he'd have to wait until he moves to a different court. The way our courts are divided up, moves to a different court before having a judge, or before even requesting a judge to set a bond. And even still, judge may not set a bond, or maybe cost prohibitive and he can't get out anyway.
Mm-hmm. Now, remember I said that when this first happened, the community was in shock. They didn't know the other part of the story. They only knew the one life of the coach, oh my God, the coach is dead. What happened? So let's get back to him a little bit. He'd been married for 21 years, had 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. His wife, this is before the revelation of the shootout and what happened. The wife did make a comment, and the school made a comment. Everybody was talking. Everyone was publicly mourning the loss of the coach. So I think this is very interesting. This is the coach's wife. This is what she said to TV station WTVD about being heartbroken, obviously, about the murder of her husband. Here is a clip.
He did everything God wanted him to, and God wanted him back home. And my heart is pure at that. It's broken, but it's pure at that.
Now, I know it was a little bit hard to hear Barney's wife. So what she said is that he did everything God wanted him to do, and God wanted him back home. So based on her comments at this point, and again, the authorities have not revealed at this point what Barney was doing up there, I wonder whether she knew about Barney's other life.
Yeah, and I would hope or expect that she has been in communication with an attorney that she knows or trusts, because that's definitely an avenue that I expect law enforcement to try to go down. in terms of what, if anything, did she know? We know Barney has a secret life that probably doesn't share with friends, colleagues, and hopefully students. We know that Barney is in communication with his wife's brother about his secret life. So there's an assumption that the wife knows about it, unless, they're saying that they're going to keep their wife/sister away from all of this. But I wouldn't expect her to be making any comments. Probably wise for her not to be making any additional statements to law enforcement, because, it always becomes that game of, hey, we're trying to solve this. You need to help us solve it. But you also have to look out for self a little bit in terms of, you don't want investigation to kind of turn or focus its attention on you. And then how are you going to get wrapped up in this? Whether it remains state or whether the feds start getting involved. And then when you mention brother-in-law being worried about safety, I guess my question is wife worried about her safety as well? And probably is, and probably like for good reason, if all of these assumptions that we're making about who or what is involved are true.
Yeah, I think so. And after the revelation was made about what Barney was really doing and how he got killed, she has not had any public comment about that. And she may very well be a target as well. So we don't know the answer to that. And this investigation is ongoing. Also, when Barney was first killed, the school initially put out a statement saying that the community was in mourning. The students were asked to wear their school colors to celebrate Coach Harris's life. And they also repeated his life motto, which is the motto that he always told the kids to get them going. All love, no fear. Well, I gotta say, if this was Barney's, rallying cry, all love, no fear, it's kind of how he ended his life.
Well, you say in terms of, went out guns blazing, or, went out and said, I have no fear in terms of who we are going after. But, and like I go like back and forth for your brother-in-law to come to you, I got to have the feeling of, that they didn't know what they were really getting themselves into. Mm-hmm. And that thinking that this was just going to be quick, go in, we grab what's there and we leave. And it appears obviously didn't go as planned because of what happened to Barney, but doesn't go as planned because of what happened with the runner who came in, and how, unless you think the cartel, tied him up and shot him, then if that didn't happen, then you're kind of like points you to Barney and brother-in-law are the ones who are doing this. Mm-hmm. So it's like, like I said, just very odd situation. And back to the students, kind of think in terms of how I would feel as a parent if that had occurred, because like we said, someone that you trusted with the care and instruction of your child, and you want your children to still have those good memories. But this is a violent, dangerous situation that could have easily spilled over, to the school or to that other part of his life that was trying to keep separate.
And once it was revealed how Barney died, then the school put out a completely different statement in reaction to that news, which did not involve the kids wearing school colors. The school issued a new statement saying that they were, quote, shocked and devastated, and left it at that, which is probably wise. And that does say a lot. What's also interesting is that when the coach was first discovered dead, the community decided to honor his life, and they set up a GoFundMe account and page. But then the minute the sheriff revealed the rest of the story, the account was frozen.
Yeah, so that will be shut down immediately.
So
because you
really,
got to distance yourself from that. If you're administration, I mean, parents are probably asking, like, what type of people are you bringing around our students? What type of people are you hiring? So you got to distance yourself from that.
So it is still an active investigation. The FBI and Mexican authorities are involved. More charges are expected. Now, back to this whole cartel thing. The sheriff is worried that the Sinaloa cartel, once run by El Chapo, is going to retaliate. And he has publicly said that there could be a sequel. Now, it could be in various forms, this sequel. So here is a clip of the sheriff talking about this.
I'm still worried about some retaliation because the Mexican cartels, they don't forget. They're going to pay somebody back somewhere.
He says, I'll tell you right now, Sheriff, I'm still worried about retaliation. They're going to pay somebody back, is the last thing he says.
Yeah, that's just an odd statement for the sheriff to make, which, kind of goes to, we don't have that here. And to come out and say, because I don't understand in terms of what he possibly gains from doing that. Are you telling the community, buckle up, get ready, cartel's coming for us. So we got to be looking for anybody that looks like they're, cartel. So it's just this odd statement for the continuation of statements made by the sheriff just seem odd to me.
Yeah, I mean, look, when these deals go bad and go as badly as this did, probably somewhere someone will pay for it. Whether it's going to be another shootout in North Carolina, that I don't know. But my guess is, yeah, there could be some payback. There's a little bit of logic to it. It's to what degree is the question. So it certainly has been a fascinating case. There's just a little bit more insight into the coach, just a tiny bit. While he did seem like a regular guy, there were a few indications of trouble recently in his life. Last August, he was charged with a concealed weapons charge. Probably not too unusual, given what we know now. Right. And then it appears in September that there may have been a minor drug charge out of Oklahoma that's still being investigated. If that is true, I would have these questions. What the heck was he doing working at a school if something is flagging criminally for him, even if it's minor?
Well, I guess it would depend on, he's at a charter school, so not with the North Carolina, public school system. So it would depend on his contract if he had a duty to self-disclose. And even so, with the gun charge, based on where we are, or where I am, where this took place, that's not necessarily something that's going to cause a great deal of concern.
Right.
In that carrying a concealed weapon, it is a low-level misdemeanor. That's his only charge. You can get what we call here a conditional discharge, meaning that you do what I call sort of like mini probation. Just do what the judge orders you to do, and within a period of time, it gets dismissed. And then it's like the other question would be, where was the gun located? For instance, did he have it in his vehicle and it wasn't in the open, but he had it in the glove compartment or under the seat? And did he notify law enforcement? And they said, hey, thanks for telling us, but I still got to issue you this citation for carrying a concealed weapon. You mentioned low-level drug charge out of Oklahoma. Then, my question would be, well, what was that charge? Are we talking about cocaine or are we talking about marijuana? And values change or are changing, and laws differ in terms of what state you're in. So those wouldn't necessarily cause me to look back in terms of hindsight and say, hey, these were flags that we missed. These point to that dangerous lifestyle. Mm-hmm. But it was like I said, we're talking about cocaine, then, obviously.
I don't think it was. I think it was something, and perhaps some marijuana residue. It was a minor charge. But you only start looking at those things when you have something as big as this, and you're like, well, what was going on in the coach's life? So this may be completely irrelevant to the bigger picture of the shootout here. We will be watching this case because I think if more arrests are made and it has a greater revelation of what's going on as far as the trafficking of drugs, I think that in itself will be very fascinating. It is time for our comments section, and Owen Michael from our website is joining us now with the crime stories you all are talking about and the kind of comments that you're leaving on social media for us. Hi, Owen.
Hi, Anna. Hi, Robert. How are you guys doing?
Hey, doing fine, Owen. How are you?
Good.
Excellent. We've got some comments this week. As we do, we get comments across our social media platforms and on the truecrimedaily.com site. And of course, we read them all. Stop by and tell us what you think. Anna, in particular, loves to comment on YouTube, so drop her a line there.
I do.
This week, we've got a California man was arrested for allegedly stealing a police car from a hospital in Arizona last week. Police said Raudel Cardenas got into a fully marked police vehicle parked outside Banner Desert Medical Center in Mesa, Arizona, which is in the Phoenix metro area. Keys were reportedly in the car. Cardenas was arrested about 2 miles away when an officer saw him allegedly sitting in, then exiting the vehicle. The Lake Hughes, California man reportedly told police he took the vehicle so he could go home, quotes. Kedzie H says, obviously he wasn't a good getaway driver, LOL. Jeff H says, well, if home was back to prison, he made the right choice.
That's what I was thinking.
And Teresa A, shutting it all down here. The officer should have locked the car doors.
Yeah, right? To leave the keys in the car. This is like a scene now out of The Hangover.
Well, those two, I was thinking of those two comments are the ones that popped in my mind in terms of one, he should have locked it. But
I wonder,
it's the police officer who's going to be dumb enough to steal a police officer's vehicle. And then with the person who stole it, you're thinking that that's a cry for help. You want to get caught. I mean, that's not something you're going to blend in and just drive off into the sunset.
That's right. I imagine that the cops are just sort of like, no one would ever dare try to take this vehicle. So I wonder how common that is across departments across the country.
Without saying too much, we had an elected official in North Carolina who left his car running in the driveway, and the car was stolen, I think like twice. So you just got to be careful, I guess, across the board with that.
Well, this also comes after we've had several instances over the last several weeks. When a Florida man was arrested a couple of weeks ago after he allegedly stole an ambulance from a hospital. He took it right out of the bay. There was an ambulance chase in Dallas a couple of weeks back. There was an ambulance theft by a patient in Pennsylvania. An ambulance with a pregnant woman inside was stolen in Oklahoma a couple of weeks ago. So not sure about this national trend, but if you are visiting a hospital now, you have one extra thing to concern yourself with. Take care out there.
You know, there is one thing about riding in a patrol car, meaning taking one for a spin. There is a part, I think, I'll just speak for myself, that's like, wouldn't that kind of be fun? You know? Well,
if you could do the lights and sirens, then yeah.
I'm not advocating it, but
I don't know. To get caught, got to have some fun with it. But yeah, certainly not advocating anyone go out and try to do that.
Of course not. I mean, I could see this sort of like in the movie Superbad or something like that. If you're like a high school kid or something, still in the making the bad choices part of your life, maybe. But a grown ass man, I'm not so sure.
Yeah,
grown ass man. Owen has the last word.
See you guys next week.
Bye, Owen. Thank you. That is our program for this week. Robert, it has been such a pleasure having you on. I want to share with everyone that we talked about a little earlier, that one of the things that you do that I find hilarious, so entertaining, is that you do this lip syncing to movie and TV show scenes. It's hilarious.
Yes, my son is a budding aspirational actor, so we sort of like did movie scenes together. Sort of came up with that during the height of the pandemic when everybody was just locked inside, needing things to entertain ourselves. And he knows more of some of the songs that are out now. I mean, I try to keep up with it because I have like young kids, young clients, but he's more in tune to some of the newer artists that come out.
Well, they're highly entertaining. And when I saw those on Instagram, I said to our producer, I said, oh my God, we've got to get him on the program. This is a fascinating criminal defense attorney with a sense of humor.
So I got to make sure to start doing more of it.
Yeah. And also I love the fact that you're wearing your gamer headset here that presumably is not yours, Robert.
Yeah, it is not mine, and I got it from him this morning. So whenever I do Zoom sessions, always where they need to have, they always say, or people ask, hey, bring headphones. So he's into gaming, like I guess a lot of teenagers are, kids his age. So he has like a couple of these and lets me use them for Zoom sessions.
I love it. It's great. It's been such a pleasure. We hope that you'll come back. Where can people find you? Where can they find your videos? How can they follow you and find your law firm as well?
Oh, hey, certainly. Like I said, so my name is Rob Corbett. We are a 2-attorney criminal defense firm located in Charlotte, North Carolina. We cover Charlotte as well as some of the surrounding counties. We focus on violent felonies, upper-level felonies, as well as federal cases. Office number 704-401-5299, 704-401-5299. Website cmlaw-nc.com. C as in Charlotte, M as in Mecklenburg, LAW-NC as in North Carolina.com. Instagram, Robert K. Corbett, ESQ. I wasn't that creative, so I use ESQ like probably far too many attorneys. But you can find that on Instagram as well.
Excellent. You know, you're the first person ever to give out a phone number on our podcast. I love it.
Well, in the rare chance that someone's listening and happens to be in North Carolina, and on top of that, they happen to get into any type of serious trouble, then, hey, they can call us. But always say, hey, you guys will never need me. But if you know anybody who does, feel free to have them call us.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I'll be watching the podcast, on YouTube while I'm being arrested. It's like, hey, I got an attorney here.
I say, hey, there you go. See, that one person. That's it. All come into handy.
You never know, right? You can find me at Anna G News, Anna with the 1 N on all social media sites. As always, you can find our content on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube. Subscribe. We've got 4.5 million subscribers to our channel, and also subscribe to our newsletter at truecrimedaily.com. Until next week, I'm your host, Ana Garcia. And as we always say, don't do crime.